video is kindly sponsored by italki, whose services I've been using over the last years to get better at speaking Japanese. Hi friends! As you might remember, I visited language school in Japan for quite a few months. Before that, I took quite a few italki lessons to prepare myself for that and also to feel more confident when speaking. Today, I will compare my experiences on italki and also in language school to help you figure out which one might be the best fit for you. But before we start, I will quickly explain to you how both services work. I went to a language school in Yokohama called Yokohama Design College for 6 months, and I went there for 20 hours a week. So I spent a lot of time there during my time in Japan. We studied all kinds of skills, but the emphasis was definitely on the JLBT and not at all on speaking. I feel like speaking was the thing we did the least. It was just expected from us that we can do it eventually. I had around 20 classmates, and we also did trips to the museum, for example, or Disney Sea, the aquarium, and also had some school festivals. italki is an online language learning platform that offers personalized one-on-one lessons with native-speaking teachers. They offer flexible and affordable lessons for a big variety of languages, including Japanese. You can simply pick a teacher depending on your criteria and book either one lesson or a lesson package with them. Each lesson can last anywhere from 30 to 90 minutes, depending on your preferences. So how do the two compare? Let's first compare student to teacher time. So in language school, we were around 20 people in my class, and of course we only had one teacher at once, so they had to split up the time between all of us, and the schedule was quite strict and also quite tight, so we didn't really have time to clarify individual questions. So if I didn't understand a grammar point and I tried to ask something, there wasn't always time to explain it, and I also heard it from friends who were in the lower classes who were just studying N5, and it's very important to understand the basics, of course, and that's why they tried to ask quite a few questions so they actually understand what they were learning, but the teacher said, no, we don't have time, shoganai, ganbarimasu, and they just went on and never really explained a lot, which is a bit sad because I feel like this takes away some good learning opportunities, and of course we also had to invest a lot of time after school in return to really understand what we were supposed to learn, which was not always feasible with working part-time jobs and stuff. And also some of the teachers only came like 1 or 2 minutes before the lesson started and then left the classroom right after the class was over. So if you had a question, you had to go to the teacher's office, and there was a special procedure you had to do, like you had to knock and say something specific, and then you had to go to the teacher, say something specific again, then ask your question, of course all in Japanese because there was a Japanese only rule, and a lot of us didn't do it because we weren't that comfortable in speaking, so we never really asked. On italki, on the other hand, it's a one-on-one class, so the teacher only pays attention to you and you can decide the pace and what you want to learn. Your teacher then pays a lot of attention to your learning progress, obviously. They will not only answer your questions, but they will also adjust the lesson to your needs, your level, and what you really want to do. And I will expand more on this later when I talk about flexibility. For example, when I take my speaking classes, I can ask my teacher about the differences between very similar words that I can't figure out otherwise. And afterwards, I always feel a bit more clear about like all the tiny details and the nuances that are sometimes very hard to understand for language learners. 最近勉強した言葉について質問があります。
どうぞ。はい。
くだらないと大したことないと
うん。
些細の違いは何ですか？
おー、なるほど。確かに3つ全部似たような感じで使えますよね。くだらないは結構ネガティブなニュアンスになります。はい。この3つの中で多分ネガティブな時に何かを批判する時に使う言葉になると思います。はい。重要じゃない、大事じゃないとか、はい。あとは、例えば、冗談とか、くだらない冗談ということができます。はい。くだらない冗談。これは、笑うことができない、面白くない冗談。そんな感じの意味にも使えます。大したことないは、どう言ったらいいかな。本当に小さいことで、大きいことじゃないです。 みたいなニュアンスですね。大体大事じゃないみたいなニュアンスになると思います。はい。でも、例えば、何かこう、じゃあセリーヌさんと友達が一緒に道を歩いていて、じゃあ友達が転びました。で、ああ、痛い。はい。この時に、セリーヌさんは、あ、大丈夫と聞いて、で、友達は、あ、大丈夫、大丈夫、大したことないということができます。問題ないですよという時に使うことができます。はい。そんな大きい問題じゃないです。という感じです。
ポジティブな感じです。
そうです、そうです。はい、無事です。これはこの二つは使うことができないです。今日はその三つ目ですね。些細なことは、細かいことみたいなニュアンスですかね。例えば、じゃあ何でしょう。じゃあこのスマートフォン、ちょっと今いろいろ問題があります。はい。で、例えば、インターネットが使えません。これは大きな問題です。でも、例えば、ちょっと小さい傷ができてしまいました。はい。でも、スマートフォンはまだ使えます。これは些細な問題です。はい。はい。小さいとか、そうですね、細かいみたいなニュアンスになることが多いですね。
なるほど。
はい。
はい。
こんな感じの説明で大丈夫ですか？
大丈夫です。大丈夫です。ありがとうございます。
はい。はい。
時々、そんな同じような言葉はすごく大変です。
そうですね。似てる言葉たくさんありますよね。わかります。はい。
今、N3 レベルのことについて勉強しているから、たくさん同じような言葉が出てきます。
はい、出てきます。いいチャレンジですね。
はい、そうですね。
日本で学校に行ってた時は N3 ぐらいのレベルの勉強をしてたんですか？
はい、そうです。
じゃあ、たくさん似たような言葉とかたくさん勉強しましたか？
はい、勉強しましたけど、違いについて全然話しませんでした。暗記するだけ。
おーすごく日本的な学校のシステムですね。
はい、そうです。
私もドイツ語で文章を書くときに、ドイツ語も本当にたくさん似てる言葉があるので。
私にとって同じじゃないけど。はいはい。So let's talk about the price. I guess we all know that language school is kind of expensive, especially if you do it in Japan. So for my time in language school, which was 6 months, I paid around 3,000 euros in tuition fees and also textbook fees. And I also had to move to Japan, obviously, because it was in person. So I paid rent on top of it, of course. And for the 6 months, I paid around another 3,000 euros of rent for living in a share house in my own private room. So yeah, this was quite expensive and takes a lot of sacrifice to save for that and to spend all of this money in just 6 months. On italki, however, classes start from $5 per lesson. So you can immerse yourself in a different culture without first going bankrupt and also without living overseas, which is of course more doable for most people since you also don't have to quit your job or uproot your entire life just to move somewhere. And speaking of price, I also have a little surprise for you at the end of the video regarding italki. So stay till the end to find out what it is. So let's speak about flexibility. On italki, you don't have to put in 20 hours a week to study Japanese, which again is very unrealistic for a lot of people. And I also feel like it kind of didn't really make sense because it was just so much and you had to take up so much that you would just forget half of it in the meantime. Even though you learn quite a lot in a short time, it doesn't mean everyone remembers what we actually learned or we're supposed to know. So it wasn't the most effective learning method in my opinion. And especially if you're just starting out learning Japanese as a beginner, it can be very overwhelming hearing so much Japanese and having to remember so much, which also some of my friends in the lower classes complained about during language school. On italki, however, you can, for example, start with a 30-minute lesson per week. So you can just ease into it and you can increase increase the lessons, of course, as you go, and depending on how much you want to study, how much time you actually have. And you can buy a lesson bundle to save a bit of money, but you can also just buy individual lessons to stay even more flexible. You're also very flexible when it comes to choosing your teacher, because there are so many Japanese teachers on the website, and you can just browse through them and see who might be a good fit depending on their interests maybe, or what they specialized on. And if you don't vibe with a teacher, you can switch teachers at any time, so you're not stuck with the teacher you don't like, as I was in language school, because I didn't like two of my teachers. We had 5 in total, and they would rotate every single day. So we had a Monday teacher, Tuesday teacher, Wednesday teacher, etc. I didn't like 2 of them, so half of my week was spent not really enjoying class and sometimes being scared in class. And because of that, I almost lost my fun for studying Japanese, and I was kind of getting sick of studying it, which was not great because Japanese is one of my biggest passions. So I was a bit scared that I would get out of language school and completely hate it, which fortunately didn't happen. But I also know from people who just quit Japanese after graduating from school because they were just sick of it, which is so sad because it's such a cool language. I'm happy that I don't have to experience this again, and that I now have more flexibility to actually speak to people I enjoy speaking to. And when I chose my teacher on italki, I also had 2 trial lessons before, so they are usually a bit cheaper than a standard lesson, and then I decided on the teacher that I liked the most. In language school, we of course all followed the same schedule, and it didn't really matter what we wanted to improve on. We just had to do what everyone else was doing since we were a big class. On italki, however, I can just tell my teacher, this week I would like you to correct my essay, or this week I just want to speak, this week I want to go through a chapter in my quartet textbook, for example, when I didn't understand something. This is very nice because I'm the one in charge and I can just tell her what I want to do, since I study a lot on my own. So I don't need someone to have a set schedule for me, even though you can also ask your teacher to do that. If you want to go through a textbook with them, you can also say, every week I want to go through a chapter with you, for example, and this is also possible. But in my case, I mostly do speaking and essay correction. So this week I asked her to correct my text. 話す前に私の文章を直してもらえますか？
もちろんです。はい。じゃあ、セリーヌさん読んでもらえますか？
勇気はある人、オリバー。私が尊敬する有名な人はオリバー・サイクスです。イギリス出身でミュージシャンであり、ファッションデザイナーもある。BMTH という、ロックバンドのボーカリストだ。
はい。いいですね。すごい。はい。いいですね。かっこいいアーティスト。アーティスト？
はいはいはい。
はい。うんうん。いいですね。はい。すごく素敵な文章です。は
あり
い。
がとうございます。
じゃあ、少し、そうですね。文章のちょっと直しましょうか。はい。直すところそんなに多くないですけど、一番最初のタイトルで、勇気はある人のこのはじゃなくてがいいです。はい。勇気がある人。あとは、すごく小さいことですけど、1、2、3、4、5行目5行目のこの感動的の、はい、ここの後ろにだが必要です。感動的だから。はい。だからだ。はい、そうです、そうです。ADHD でも、ここを ADHD も抱えている。でがいらないですね。
はい。
はい。あとは、この音楽の後ろ、ここにおが欲しいです。音楽、下から2行目。はい。そこです、そこです。そこにおが欲しいです。
なるほど。
はい。すごく小さいポイントです。は特にないですね。And by letting my teacher correct the texts that I just wrote the other day, I get real-time feedback and guidance, and I can just ask her right at the spot, but why do I have to change that, or why isn't that correct? Because in language school, for example, we just got our texts back with a lot of red markings, and
there wasn't really much of an explanation, and sometimes I didn't really understand why something was wrong. And as I told you, asking questions was sometimes a bit difficult, so I just tried to figure it out alone somehow. But yeah, on italki I don't have to waste my time sitting over a corrected essay and asking myself, what is she trying to tell me? And that way I can focus even more on my weaknesses and grammar points that I may be still not that great at, and just improve as I go. But for example, if you just want to focus on speaking or improving your listening, you can also just do that. In language school, however, I didn't really had the chance to improve my speaking a lot because, as I told you, we didn't really practice speaking. We had some shadowing practice, but this was almost all of it. And then all of a sudden we were expected to hold presentations about natural disasters or the gender pay gap and how to fix that, which is of course very hard if you can't even form a proper question, which was the level some of my classmates speaking was at. And they were in language school even before me, so they stayed in language school for a whole year, but still at the end they weren't really able to speak a lot, which was very sad because I feel like a lot of people go to language school in Japan to continue with higher education afterwards or to find a job. But if you cannot speak, that will be a big problem. And it doesn't matter if you can pass the JLPT or not. If you can't speak in an interview, they will just get rid of you. So I didn't feel like it was the most effective thing to do overall. And also because of some very unnecessarily unfriendly reactions from one of our teachers, I actually got even more scared of speaking than I was before. That's of course not helpful when you try to get better, and I'm kind of a shy person when it comes to speaking a foreign language, and I question myself a lot, so I don't want to be screamed at if I do a mistake, for example, which happened to some people in language school. And even though I was not targeted personally most of the time, it still made me kind of scared to speak Japanese, and I just ended up not speaking up in class at all if I didn't have to. Whereas with my italki teacher, she doesn't judge me if I make the same mistake over and over again. She will just correct me, or sometimes I will just ask for clarification if I know that I'm not finding the right word. And it helps a lot, especially because I chose a teacher that also speaks a little bit of German because I'm a native German. I can just ask her in German for a word that I can't think of in Japanese, and she can just give me the Japanese equivalent, which always helps.
多分、日本に住んだ最後の数ヶ月について、話したいです。はい。
ぜひぜひ聞きたいです。
はい。鎌倉何回も行きました。
ああ、いいですね。
すごくいい街だと思います。観客がたくさんあるけど、ビーチで、すごく、平気、
静かですね。
静か。はい。はい。でも、ビーチで、はい、すごく静かです。
ああ、そうなんですね。いいですね。じゃあ結構リラックスできる雰囲気なんですね。
そうです。いつも新しい動物を見つけました。
動物はい。どんな動物がいました？
カニとか、
人手かな星の形の、はい。
人で？
はい、人で、はい。
はい、人でか、魚とか。はい。
なるほど。
たくさん見つけました。
いいですね。じゃあすごくその自然が綺麗なところなんですね。
はい、そうです。いつも、新しい人と話しました。
すごい。はい。
日本のおじさんたくさんと話しました。
いいですね。
私たちはビーチで、散歩しましたが、彼は、おはよう誰ですかどこから来ましたかイタリア音楽はすごくいいですね。そんな感じ。
すごいですね。じゃあすごくフレンドリーにおじさんから話しかけてくれたんですね。
そうです。一回、 亀も見つけました。でも、海に住んでいる亀、いませんでした？
うんうん。
川に住んでいる亀です。Süßwasser? 甘い水。
なるほど、なるほど。そうですね。はい。甘い水、しょっぱくない水ですね。
はいはい、そうです、そうです。だから、すごく驚きました。亀について、日本にを聞きました。はい。
あ、はい。
どうすればいいですか？
なるほど。亀を助けてあげようとしたんですね。
そうです。
うん。
でも、人たちは全然わかりませんでした。
そうですね。
うん。
うん。
でも、横浜で家の近くに川があります。亀も、います。だから、多分、横浜まで持ってきま
持っていきます。
持っていき
はい。あ、
ます。
でも連れて行きますの方
多分、
が優しい感じかな。
連れてきます。でも、箱
うん。あ、
がありませんでした。他の町のサイド
はい。
サイドで池がありました。はい。
うんうん。
だから、その池に連れて行きました。はい。
なるほど。よかったです。うん
う
うんうん。
ん。
優しい。うん。
うん。ちょっと、暴言多分出た暴言
はい。冒険はい。ああ、なるほど。そうですね。ちょっと冒険ですね。
はい。
うん。なんか、お話、なんかそういう RPG っぽいです。はい。
はい。
なんかクエストが。
はい、クエスト。サイドクエストです。
Another way how italki shows its flexibility is by the tools they offer. They don't only offer one-on-one classes, but also podcasts, vocabulary sets, and they also launched a new feature this year which is called italki Plus. It includes AI-powered tools like flashcards and lesson summaries to help you consolidate what you've learned in your lesson. You can practice with quizzes to improve your ability to choose the right responses.
Quiero estar en forma para el verano.
And also track your progress through speaking time as well as the vocabulary, grammar, and phrases you've mastered. You can even see how your sentence length improves over time and how your sentences compare to those of native speakers. And if you want to see what those new features can do for your language learning, you can just try them out 1 month for free and see for yourself. And then we come to the last point, which is the feeling of immersion. Of course, this was stronger when I was in language school and actually lived in Japan than compared to living in Germany and having Japanese lessons online. But it also took a lot out of me. Like I said before, money, I had to move. I had to work from overseas, which is not also feasible for everyone. And it also came with a lot of considerations regarding like legal rules and taxes and stuff. So it was quite a big trade-off for feeling more immersed. And of course, it was nice to do Hatsumode, so visit the shrine for the first time in the year with my class in Japan. But I feel like it's more feasible for people to try to study from their home country through italki, for example, and improve that way, and then save all the money that you would have spent on language school and moving overseas to just do a very nice and long trip to Japan where you can do all the cultural things that you want to do and you're already kind of good at speaking Japanese and you can just communicate with locals there. And in my experience, if you can speak a little bit and you're not in the most touristy place like Yokohama, for example, people will respond very nicely and they're open to talking with you and they're interested why you're here, why you're learning Japanese. So you can also have your real immersion experiences doing your trip, for example. And even though I'm happy that I went to language school and it's definitely an experience I will not forget that quickly, I wouldn't do it again, to be honest, because I liked living in Japan, but being in language school was very stressful. And as I told you before, it almost made me dislike studying Japanese. So going forward, I will just continue with italki and talking to my sensei over there and just ask her all the questions that I have, trying to improve that way. And it's especially fun because I can just talk about my everyday life I've used the vocab that I actually need to use, because in language school we also learned a lot of vocab that I would never use because it was part of the JLPT, but it was not important to me, so it didn't stick in my brain. So going forward, I will use this method to chip away at my fear of speaking. And if you'd like to give italki a try, you can click the link in my description below to start your language learning journey. The first 50 people who will use my promo code CELINE will get $5 on top when they purchase $10 of credit, so better be quick. So we arrived at the end of the video, and thank you again to italki for sponsoring this video, and also thank you for sticking around. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And if you want to know even more about my language school experience, I will link you my review video about language school, where I talked about all the things that I liked and didn't like, and also my playlist with the videos that I did while living in Japan. So check them out, and I will see you in my next video very soon. Bye bye!